Welcome to this expert mini module on CBM Administration and Scoring. In Project EXPERT, we are developing and testing a program to support teacher expertise in data-based instruction and improve outcomes for upper elementary students with persistent reading challenges. We have 3 guiding questions for this module. Throughout this module, we will think through content related to administering and scoring oral reading fluency CBM. Guiding questions. How do I administer oral reading fluency curriculum-based measurement, ORF CBM? How do I score ORF CBM? Why is it important to administer and score ORF CBM with fidelity? CBM are brief and focused, timed assessments that indicate a student's overall progress in a content area. For example, some CBM systems are FastBridge, Easy CBM, and Dibbles. In this module, we're focusing on administering and scoring CBM for ongoing progress monitoring. The most common form of CBM used in upper elementary reading is oral reading fluency, or ORF, where students read a passage aloud for 1 minute and their errors are tracked. Research has shown us that ORF CBMs are strong indicators of a student's overall reading proficiency. Why is it important to know how to correctly administer and score ORF CBM? To answer this question, it is helpful to think about why we rely on CBM in the first place. ORF CBM is an incredibly valuable tool because it is brief and simple to use, in addition to being a reliable and valid measure. It is able to be sensitive to small changes in student performance and allows us to observe and respond to growth or a lack of growth in a short amount of time. However, these characteristics of CBM are true only if and when we administer and score the probes as they are designed. Let's take a moment to reflect on your current CBM process. If you need a bit more time, pause the video to think about these questions. Reflection. Do you already administer ORF CBM? If so, which components do you administer or complete in the same way every time? Do you use a script from your CBM publisher, or do you know the process by heart? Do you sometimes need to switch things up based on an individual student's need? Now let's explore the administration of ORF CBM. Although CBM vendors and publishers develop their own administration procedures, you'll need a standard set of materials for any ORF CBM. Before beginning, ensure you have copies of the passage for the student and yourself, the standardized directions provided by your CBM vendor, a means of recording student responses, and a timer or stopwatch. If you plan to record student responses electronically, be sure you are able to mark your electronic version in the moment. You'll also want to make sure you are conducting the CBM in a quiet place that is as free as possible from distractions. This includes positioning your materials in such a way that the student cannot see your scoring. This is one example of what an ORF probe might look like. This passage is from Dibbles' 8th edition. It is passage 7 from grade 3, Meet Your Spleen. You can access Dibbles' materials for free at dibbles.uoregon.edu. On the left is the student copy of the passage, and on the right is the administrator copy. You'll notice the passage is the same, but the administrator copy contains some features that are missing from the student copy, including numbers down the right-hand side to indicate the total word count at the end of each line, as well as space to record the total number of words read, the number of errors, and the calculation for the number of words read correctly in 1 minute. Since exact procedures will vary according to vendor, it is critically important that you adhere precisely to the standardized administration procedures for your particular CBM system. Before the student begins reading, you will read the administration directions exactly as they are written and start the timer at the point indicated in your directions. As the student reads, record their responses on your copy of the passage, making sure to adhere to your vendor's guidelines for correct responses, as well as what constitutes an error. At the end of 1 minute, stop the student and mark the last word read. Let's take a look at some sample procedures. all of the samples we'll show you in this module are from DIBELS 8. DIBELS is not the only CBM system, but we have selected their sample materials as DIBELS 8 is widely used and freely available. These are the examiner script and reminders for Passage 7 from Grade 3, Meet Your Spleen. These procedures may vary slightly from those included in your CBM system, but don't worry. None of these variations make one system superior to another. Just make sure you stay consistent and use procedures and passages that are designed to go with one another. In these procedures, the examiner script printed in bold text must be read verbatim. The text in parentheses should not be read aloud. It serves to direct the administrator to follow the same administration procedures every time to ensure a reliable process and valid data. Our ORF data are accurate only to the extent that we administer the probes with fidelity. A critically important component of fidelity is timing, so we must ensure that we are beginning and ending our probes correctly. After reading the administration directions verbatim to the student, start the timer according to the instructions in your manual. For most CBM systems, you will start the timer when the student says the first word. At exactly 60 seconds, put a bracket after the last word the student read before time ran out. Now let's explore the proper scoring of ORF CBM. In the following slides, you'll learn the guidelines for marking and scoring ORF probes. When a student reads a word correctly, we make no mark. Make a slash through each word the student reads incorrectly. At the end of a probe, we'll know how many words the student read correctly in 1 minute. Once you're done, a sample probe might look like this. Let's talk more about specific scoring rules. If you are using CBM software on your computer or tablet, your system likely calculates the score for you. Remember, though, that the generated score is only as accurate as your ability to distinguish between correct responses and errors and to mark errors accurately. In addition to correctly reading the words in a passage, there are several situations in which student responses should be scored as correct. First, when the student reads the correct word but pronounces it in a non-standard manner due to regional differences, dialect, or an articulation difference, the word is scored as correct. For example, if a child reads the word wash as warsh, you would score it as correct. Generally, use your judgment of the student to determine whether they are decoding the word as intended. Another common situation is an insertion. Inserted words are not counted as errors. For the sentence, "The brown dog ran across the road," a student would not be penalized for reading "The big brown dog ran across the road." Similarly, repetition of a word is not considered an error. "The brown dog ran across the road" would be scored as correct. Finally, a self-correction that occurs within 3 seconds is not considered to be an error. On the previous slide, we noted that alternate pronunciations due to regional differences, dialect, or articulation differences are not considered to be errors. However, words that are mispronounced, misread, or substituted are errors. For example, if a child reads the word wash as wish, you would score it as an error. Reversing 2 words is scored as 1 error for each word. In the case of the sentence, "The dog brown ran across the road," 2 errors would be counted. Omitting or skipping a word, as in "The dog ran across the road," counts as an error. Finally, a hesitation of 3 seconds is scored as an error. In this case, tell the child the word and have them continue reading. If the child self-corrects the word after 3 seconds have passed, it is still scored as an error. Let's practice with the sentence, "Rafts moved up and down the rivers." The student reads, "Rafts moved on and up and down the rivers." How would we score the sentence? A self-correction within 3 seconds is counted as correct reading, so there is no error. The student read 7 out of 7 words correctly. Try this one on your own. The student reads, "Rafts moved down and up the rivers." How would you score this sentence? The student reversed the words up and down, so there are 2 errors. If you scored 5 out of 7 words correct, that's right. The student reads, "Rats moved up and down a river." How would you score the sentence? The student substituted the word rats for rafts and a river for the rivers, so there are 3 errors. If you scored 4 out of 7 words correct, that's right. The student reads, "Rafts moved up and down all the rivers." How would you score the sentence? The student inserted the word all. An insertion is counted as correct reading, so there is no error. You may want to add a caret to indicate an insertion if you like. If you scored 7 out of 7 words correct, that's right. One last example. The student reads, "Rafts moved down the rivers." How would you score the sentence? The student omitted the words up and, so there are 2 errors. If you scored 5 out of 7 words correct, that's right. Make note of the numbers running down the right-hand side of your examiner copy of the passage. These correspond to the total number of words the student will have read by the end of a particular line. These will save you time and keep you from needing to count every word the student read. In this example, the student's last word was in the middle of the line ending in 129. Since they did not complete the line, you will need to subtract the last 4 words in the line. Before subtracting out errors, the total number of words for this probe is 125. Next, you add up the number of errors. In this case, the student made 31 errors. 125 words minus 31 errors leaves us with 94 words read correctly in 1 minute. Let's try an abbreviated example from Dibbles 8, Grade 5, Passage 6, Underneath the Mistletoe. I'll read it twice. The second time we will mark and score it together. Underneath the mistletoe. No one knows exactly how the Christmas tradition of kissing beneath a sprig of mistletoe began. It may come from antique times when people believed that the plant had mystical powers to give them. This time, let's mark and score this probe together. No one knows exactly how the Christmas tradition of kissing beneath a sprig of mistletoe began. It may come from antique times when people believed that the plant had mystical powers to give them. In this example, my last word was in the middle of the line ending in 37. Since I did not complete the line, we need to subtract the last 2 words in the line. Before subtracting out errors, the total number of words for this probe is 35. Next, we add up the number of errors. In this case, I made 5 errors. Remember that we do not count self-corrections or insertions as errors. 35 words minus 5 errors leaves us with 30 words read correctly. Now we will be discussing fidelity of implementation for ORF CBM. Let's take a moment to reflect on procedural fidelity. In this case, procedural fidelity refers to conducting CBM as it was designed. If you need a bit more time, pause the video to think about this question. Reflection. Procedural fidelity. conducting CBM as it was designed, using consistent procedures each time it is administered. Why do you think it is important to administer and score ORF CBM with fidelity? The first reason to ensure we are implementing ORF CBM with fidelity is that CBM are standardized measures. They have been developed and normed according to a precise set of procedures and are only valid and reliable when those manualized procedures are followed. Next, to know whether a student is making sufficient progress, we need to ensure we are measuring the same skills at the same level of difficulty in the same manner each time. Any variation in skills assessed, level of difficulty, or procedures used will result in data that cannot be compared to the student's existing data points. If we can reduce the number of things that are different between each measurement point, we can be more confident that any change we observe is actual student growth or evidence for a lack of growth. Finally, CBM data form the basis for our data-based instructional decision-making. If we are using inaccurate data due to a lack of fidelity in our implementation, then our ability to make appropriate instructional decisions will be impaired. Here are some frequently asked questions about administering ORF CBM. First, how frequently can I administer ORF probes? You can administer an ORF probe as often as every week. This is because we can detect changes in a student's oral reading fluency in a short amount of time. Weekly ORF probes are especially appropriate for students with persistent word reading difficulties, for whom time is of the essence. Next, once my students get used to the process, isn't it okay for me just to say the directions as I remember them rather than reading verbatim? As with any standardized assessment, it is important to follow all directions exactly as provided. This includes reading the directions verbatim. You can model for your students that this is the expected procedure. If you treat it as normal and expected, chances are they will too. Why does my students' data jump around from week to week? Some fluctuations are normal and expected. Some days we're at the top of our game, and other times we're feeling a bit off. The same goes for our students. This is also why we make decisions using multiple data points over time rather than basing them off a single data point. However, significant variability in data over time may point to a need for an environment with fewer distractions, additional behavioral supports, greater fidelity of administration, or increased consistency in delivering interventions as they are designed and in response to student data. Finally, we do not endorse any specific CBM vendor. So whether your school uses Easy CBM, FastBridge, Dibbles, or another CBM system, the most critical element is the degree to which fidelity is maintained by administering probes precisely as designed. Let's review our guiding questions. How do I administer oral reading fluency curriculum-based measurement, ORF CBM? Gather materials, use a timer, read directions verbatim, and record student responses according to standardized procedures of your CBM system. How do I score ORF CBM? Accurately distinguish correct responses from errors. Mark errors as well as the last word read when the timer goes off as indicated by your CBM system. Why is it so important to administer and score ORF CBM with fidelity? To obtain reliable data for progress monitoring and instructional decision-making, we must conduct CBM using standardized procedures. Thank you for your time and engagement during this mini training module. Check out our Project Expert YouTube channel for other mini modules and resources to support database decision-making in reading. Don't forget to like and subscribe. For questions about Project Expert, please contact the Principal Investigator, Dr. Jessica Tost at the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Tost's email is jrtoste@austin.utexas.edu. Project Expert is supported by a grant from the Institute of Education Sciences, U.S. Department of Education.